lesson. Go ahead and please take out your language arts notebooks, turn to a clean sheet, name today's date. Your objective today is I can explain the significance of specific lines and events in Animal Farm and what they reveal about characters and the plot. Your assignment for today is you're going to be reading Chapter 7 of Animal Farm, and you're going to be answering the following two questions. Number 1, what rumors are spread about the windmill? And number 2, how is the new windmill constructed differently? Join me now as we'll be reading Chapter 7 of Animal Farm. Chapter 7. It was a bitter winter. The stormy weather was followed by sleet and snow, and then a hard frost which did not break till well into February. The animals carried on as best they could with the rebuilding of the windmill, well knowing that the outside world was watching them and that the envious human beings would rejoice and triumph if the mill was not finished on time. Out of spite, the human beings pretended not to believe that it was Snowball who had destroyed the windmill. They said that it had fallen down because the walls were too thin. The animals knew this was not the case. Still, it had been decided to build the walls 3 feet thick this time instead of 18 inches as before, which meant collecting much larger quantities of stone. For a long time, the quarry was full of snowdrifts, and nothing could be done. Some progress was made in the dry, frosty weather that followed, but it was cruel work, and that the animals could not feel so hopeful about it as they had felt before. They were always cold and usually hungry as well. Only Boxer and Clover never lost heart. Squealer made excellent speeches of the joy of service and dignity of labor, but the animals found more inspiration in Boxer's strength and his never-failing cry of "I will work harder." In January, food fell short. The corn ration was drastically reduced, and it was announced that an extra potato ration would be issued to make up for it. Then it was discovered that the greater part of the potato crop had been frosted into the clamps, which had not been covered thickly enough. The potatoes had become soft and discolored, and only a few were edible. For days at a time the animals had nothing to eat but chaff and mangles. Starvation seemed to stare them in the face. It was vitally necessary to conceal the fact from the outside world. Emboldened by the collapse of the windmill, the human beings were investing fresh lies about Animal Farm. Once again, it was being put about that all animals were dying from famine and disease, and that they were continually fighting among themselves, and had resorted to cannibalism and infanticide. Napoleon was well aware of the bad results that might follow if the real facts of the food situation were known, and decided to make use of Mr. Wimple to spread a contrary impression. Here now, the animals had little or no contact with Wimple and his weekly visits. Now, however, a few selected animals, mostly sheep, were instructed to remark casually in his hearings that rations had been increased. In addition, Napoleon ordered that almost empty bins in the store shed be filled nearly to the brim with sand, which then covered up with what remained of the grain and meal. On some suitable pretext, Wimper was led through the store shed and allowed to catch a glimpse of the bins. He was deceived and continued to report to the outside world that there was no food shortage on Animal Farm. Nevertheless, towards the end of January, it would become obvious that there would be necessary to produce some more grain from somewhere. In these days, Napoleon rarely appeared in public, but spent all his time in the farmhouse, which was guarded at each door by fierce-looking dogs. When he did emerge, it was in a ceremonial manner, with an escort of 6 dogs who closely surrounded him and growled if anyone came too near. Frequently, he did not even appear on Sunday mornings, but issued his orders through one of the other pigs, usually Squealer. One Sunday morning, Squealer announced that the hens, who had come in to lay again, must surrender their eggs. Napoleon had accepted, through Wimper, a contract for 400 eggs a week. The price of these would pay for enough grain and meal to keep the farm going until summer came on and conditions were easier. When the hens heard of this, they raised a terrible outcry. They had been warned earlier that this sacrifice might be necessary, but had not believed that it would really happen. They were just getting into their clutches, ready for their spring sitting, and they protested that to take the eggs away now was murder. And for the first time since the expulsion of Jones, there was something resembling a rebellion. Led by 3 young black Morcalli pulpits, the hens had determined effort to thwart Napoleon's wishes. Their method was to fly up on the rafters, there laid their eggs, which smashed into pieces on the floor. Napoleon acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He ordered the hens' rations to be stopped and decreed that any animal giving so much as a grain of corn to the hens should be punished by death. The dogs saw that these orders were carried out. 5 of the hens held out and then catapulted and went back to their nesting boxes. 9 hens had died in the meantime. Their bodies were burned in the orchard, and it was given out that they had died of coronasis. Whymper heard nothing of this affair, and the eggs were duly delivered, a grocer van driving up to the farm once a week to take them away. All the while, no more had been seen of Snowball. He was rumored to be hiding out one of the neighboring farms, either Foxwood or Pinchfield. Napoleon was by this time on slighter better terms with the other farmers than before. It happened that there was in the yard a pile of timber which had been stacked there 10 years earlier when a beech spinnery was cleared. It was well seasoned. Whymper had advised Napoleon to sell it. Both Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick were anxious to buy it. Napoleon, without hesitating between the two, unable to make up his mind, it was noticed that whether he seemed on the point of coming to an agreement with Frederick, Snowball was declared to be hiding at Foxwood. While he was inclined toward Pilkington, Snowball was said to be in Pinchfield. Suddenly, early in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. The animals were so disturbed that they could hardly sleep in their stalls. Every night, it was said, he came creeping under the cover of darkness and performed all kinds of mischief. He stole the corn, he upset the milk pails, he broke the eggs. He trampled the sealed bags, and he gnawed the bark off the fruit trees. Wherever anything went wrong, it became unusual to attribute it to Snowball. If a window was broken or a drain was blocked up, someone was certain to say that Snowball had come in the night and done it. And when the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. Curiously enough, there went on believing this even after the mislaid key was found under a stack of meal. The cows declared unanimously that Snowball crept in their stalls and milked them in their sleep. The rats, which had been very troublesome with that winter, were also said to be in league with Snowball. Napoleon decreed that there should be a full investigation into Snowball's activities. With his dogs in attendance, he set out and made a clear tour of inspection on the farm buildings, and the other animals following at a respectable distance. At every few steps, Napoleon stopped and snuffed the ground for traces of Snowball's footsteps, which, he said, he could detect by the smell. He snuffed in every corner in the barn, in the cowshed, the hen houses, in the vegetable garden, and found traces of Snowball almost everywhere. He would put his snout to the ground, give several deep sniffs, and exclaim in a terrible voice, "Snowball! He has been here. I can smell him distinctively." And the word Snowball, and at that word Snowball, all the dogs let out blood-curdling growls and showed their side teeth. The animals were thoroughly frightened. It seemed to them as though Snowball were some kind of invisible influence, pervading the air about them and menacing them with all kinds of dangers. In the evening, Squealer called them all together with an alarmed expression on his face and told them he had some serious news to report. "Comrades!" Squealer cried, making a nervous skip. "A most terrible thing has been discovered. Snowball has sold himself to Frederick of Pinchfield Farms, who is even now plotting to attack us and take our farm away from us. Snowball is to act as his guide when the attack begins. But there is a worse than that. We have thought that Snowball's rebellion was caused simply by his vanity and ambition, but we were wrong. Comrades, do you know the real reason? Snowball was in league with Jones from the very start. He was Jones' secret agent all the time. He had been proved by documents which were left behind him and which were only just discovered. To my mind, this explains a great deal, comrades. But we not see it for ourselves how he attempted, fortunately without success, the great deal to get us defeated and destroyed at the Battle of Cowshed. The animals were stupefied. This was a wickedness far outdoing Snowball's destruction at the windmill, but it was some minutes before they could fully take it in. They all remembered, or thought they remembered, how they had seen Snowball charging ahead of them in the Battle of the Cowshed, and how he rattled and encouraged them at every turn, and now he had not paused for an instant even when the pellets of Jones's gun had wounded his back. At first it was a little difficult to see how this fitted in with his being on Jones's side. Even Boxer, who seldom asked questions, was puzzled. He laid down and tucked his four hoofs behind him, shut his eyes, and with hard effort managed to formulate his thoughts. I don't believe it, he said. Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. I saw for myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards? That was our mistake, comrades, for we now know it was all written down in secret documents that we have found, that in reality he was trying to lure us to our doom. But he was wounded, said Boxer. We all saw him running with blood. That was part of the agreement, cried Squealer. Jones' shot only grazed him. I can only show you this in his own writing, if you were able to read it. The plot was for Snowball at a crucial moment to give it the signal for flight and leave the field to the enemy. And he nearly succeeded, I will say, comrades. He would have succeeded if we had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. Do you remember how just at that moment when Jones and his men got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, that it was just at that moment when panic was spreading and all seemed lost that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward with a cry of death to humanity and sank his teeth into Jones's leg? Surely you remember that, comrades, exclaimed Squealer, frisking from side to side. Now, when Squealer described the scene so graphically, it all seemed to the animals that they did remember it. At any rate, they remembered that at a crucial moment that the battle Snowball had turned to flee, but Boxer was still a little uneasy. I do not remember that Snowball was a traitor at the beginning, he said finally. What he has done since is different, but I believe that at the Battle of Cowshed he was a good comrade. Our leader, Comrade Napoleon, announced Squealer, speaking very slowly and firmly, has stated categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones's agent from the very beginning. Yes, from long before the rebellion was even thought of. And that is different, said Boxer. If Comrade Napoleon said it, it must be right. That was the true spirit, comrade, cried Squealer. But it was noticed that he cast a very ugly look at Boxer with his twinkling eyes. He turned to go and paused and added impressively, I warn every animal on this farm to keep his eyes very wide open, for we have reason to think that some of Snowball's secret agents are lurking among us at this moment. 4 days late in the afternoon, Napoleon had ordered all animals to assemble in the yard. When they were gathered together, Napoleon emerged from the farmhouse, wearing both his medals, for he had recently awarded himself Animal Hero First Class and Animal Hero Second Class. With his 9 huge dogs friskily around him and uttering growls that sent shivers down the animals' spines, they all cowered silently in place, seeming to know in advance of some terrible things that were about to happen. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience, when he uttered a high-pitched whimper. Immediately the dogs bounded forward, seizing 4 of the pigs by the ear and dragged them, squealing with pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding, and the dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to go quite mad. To the amazement of everyone, 3 of them flung themselves upon Boxer. Boxer saw them coming, and out of his great hoof caught a dog in midair, and pinned him to the ground. The dog shrieked for mercy, and the 2 others fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance, and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go, whereas Boxer lifted his hoof, and the dog slunk away, bruised and howling. Presently the triumph died down, and the 4 pigs waited, trembling, with guilt written on every line of their consciousness. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. They were the same 4 pigs who had protested when Napoleon abolished the Sunday meetings. Without any further promptly, they confessed that they had secretly been in touch with Snowball ever since his expulsion, and that they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and they had entered an agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that when he had been a Jones secret agent for the years past. When he had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice Napoleon demanded that whether any animal had anything to confess. The hens, who had been their ringleaders in an attempt to rebellion over the eggs, now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. The goose came forward and confessed to having secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest and had eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed to have urinated in the drinking pools, urged to do this, so she said, by Snowball, and 2 other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon, by chasing him around and round a bonfire when he was suffering from a cough. They were all slain on the spot, and the tale of confessions and executions went on until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown there since the expulsion of Jones. When this was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and dogs, crept away in a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know which was more shocking, the treachery of the animals who had leagued themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. In the old days, there had often been scenes of bloodshed equally terrible, but it seemed to all of them that this was far worse now that it was happening amongst themselves. Since Joan had left the farm until today, no animal had killed another animal. Not even a rat had been killed. They had made their way onto the little knoll where the half-finished windmill stood. With only one accord, they all lay down, all as though huddling together for warmth. Clover, Muriel, Benjamin, the cows, the sheep, and the whole flock of geese and hens, everyone indeed except for the cat, who had suddenly disappeared just before Napoleon ordered the animals to assemble. For some time nobody had spoke. Only Boxer remained on his feet. He fidgeted to and fro, swishing his black tail against his sides, and occasionally uttering a little whining from surprise. Finally he said, "I do not understand it. I would not have believed that such things could happen on our farm. It must be due to some fault in ourselves. The solution, as I see it, is to work harder. From now onwards, I shall get up a full hour earlier in the mornings." As he moved off at his lumbering trot and made for the quarry, having got there, he collected 2 successful loads of stone and dragged them down to the windmill before retiring for the night. All animals huddled about Clover, not speaking. The knoll where they were lying gave them a wide prospect across the countryside. Most of Animal Farm was within their view. The long pastures stretching down to the main road, the hayfield, the spinnery, the drinking pools, the plow fields, where the young wheat was thick and green, and the red roofs of the farm buildings with the smoke curling from the chimneys. It was a clear spring evening. The grass and the bursting hedges were glided by the level of rays of the sun. Never had the farm, and with any kind of surprise they remembered it, was their own farm. Every inch of their own property appeared to the animals so desirable a place. As Clover looked down the hillside, his eyes filled with tears. If she could have spoken her thoughts, it would have been to say that this was not what they had aimed at when they had set themselves years ago to work for the overthrow of the human race. Their scenes of terror and slaughter were not what they had looked forward to on the night when old Mare first stirred them up to rebellion. If she herself had any picture of the future, it would have been a society of animals set free from hunger and the whip, all equal, working together according to this capacity, the strong protecting the weak. And she had protected the long brood of ducklings with her foreleg on the night of Major's speech. Instead, she did not know why they had come to a time when no one dared to speak his mind. With fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces, when fierce, growling dogs confessed shock crimes, there was no thought of rebellion or disobedience in her mind. She knew that, even as things were, they were far better off than they had been in better days of Jones, and that before all else it was needful to prevent the return of human beings. Whatever happened, she would remain faithful, work hard, and carry out the orders that had given her, and accept the leadership of Napoleon. But still, it was not for that she had, all the animals had stopped, all the other animals had hoped and trotted. It was not that they had built the windmill and faced the bullets of Jones's gun. Since were her thoughts, she had lacked the words to express them. At last, feeling this to be some way suitable of the word she was able to find, she began to sing Beasts of England. The only animals sitting round her took it up, and they sang it 3 times over, very tunefully, but slowly and mournfully, in a way they had never sung it before. They had just finished singing for a 3rd time when Squealer, attended by 2 dogs, approached them with the air of having something important to say. He announced by the decree of the Comrade Napoleon, Beast of England had been abolished, and from now onwards it was forbidden to sing it. The animals were taken back. Why? It was no longer needed, comrade, said Squealer stiffly. Beast of England was a song of rebellion, but the rebellion is now completed. The execution of the traitors this afternoon was the final act. The enemy, both external and internal, had been defeated. In Beast of England we expressed our longing for a better society in days to come. But the society has been now established. Clearly the song has no longer any purpose. Frightened though as they were, some of the animals might possibly have protested, but at the moment the sheep set up their usual bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which went on for several minutes and put an end to this discussion. So Beast of England was no more, and in its place, Minimus, the poem, had comprised another song, which began, Animal farm, never thought me shall thou, never though me shall thought thou come to harm. And this was sung every Sunday morning at the hoisting of the flag. But somehow, neither the words or the tune ever seemed to be to the animals to come up to the Beast of England. So that concludes Chapter 7 of Animal Farm. Once again, please answer the following 2 questions. What rumors are spread about the windmill? And number 2, how is the new windmill constructed differently? And make sure again in a Google Doc to answer these questions in 4 to 5 sentences. Join me next time, 8th graders, when we'll be delving into Chapter 8 of Animal Farm. Keep reading, 8th graders.